All schools, school boards, school owners are hungry. A lot of us hated history in school, but they love history when you're in your 30s and 40s.
I think the curiosity is different. At that time, it seemed like I have to memorize this and I don't want to memorize it.
Spend 1-2 years, be vulnerable, make mistakes. You learn. Heritage prepared me and my wife very well to accept a child who has different learning needs. We start appreciating the power of multiple voices, multiple perspectives. Neurodiversity is also important.
Welcome to InspireEd, the podcast where we explore the journeys of change makers who are shaping the future of education. If you're a school owner, teacher, or parent, today's conversation will be transformative on how you perceive education in your current environments. Make sure to subscribe to InspireEd and be the first to hear about transformation in education by some of the top minds to better prepare your students for life. Today, we explore the future of education with a leader who has been at the forefront of educational innovation in India, Mr. Vishnu Karthik. Vishnu is the co-founder of Heritage International Experiential School with a rich background in education and management. His expertise spans areas like project-based learning, cognitive neuroscience, leadership development, and instructional coaching. Vishnu has helped some of India's most progressive schools and is committed to transforming education by embedding creativity, empathy, and inclusivity into the learning process. Vishnu, welcome to InspireEd. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Ankur. Thank you for having me over. Thank you for this opportunity.
Great. We've been in conversation for quite some time, and before we delve into your personal journey into education, I want to start with, every time I walk into a campus, and this is my favorite question to ask, is just walk me through the mindset of this space that you've built up. I know the name itself is Experiential Learning, but truly there is some amazing things, I saw around campus at this place. So just talk to us quickly about, what this space is about, the mindset of how someone builds a space like this where, we're sitting in a maker's lab. I would love to hear for our audience on what goes behind into making a space like this.
So this space you are in is the primary campus of our international school.
Okay.
This was built about 4 years back, just the time when COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
That's the time this campus opened. But this is a unique campus because if you notice, you would find there are no corridors. In fact, all the corridors you have are all used as learning spaces. There's no traditional classrooms. You only have retractable glass doors. The idea being that learning spaces have to be flexible, adaptable. Learning spaces need not have a typical sage on the stage with children looking at the teacher and the teacher lecturing. We want flexible spaces like the way a co-working space would be.
Okay.
So we went through many years of research of what learning sciences tell us, what cognitive neuroscience tells us, what some of the best schools around the world do. So we visited over 20 odd schools around the world.
Oh, wow.
No great institution gets built by one individual. It gets built by a lot of people. But I must acknowledge Manoj Jain, whose vision played a big role in setting up this campus here. Our idea back then was that can we create something which is open? Can we create something which is adaptable? Can we create a space which is also very Scandinavian in treatment? And that's how the space is. We probably got in 3 or 4 architects, interior designers, learning scientists. It took about 24 months of designing this space. We sourced furniture from one of the best places around the world that includes Germany, Finland, Singapore, and of course many things in India as well. This was in 2018, 2019. The Make in India hadn't started yet much, so we really couldn't get much stuff from India. A lot of it just came from some of the best schools, best manufacturers of school furniture from around the world.
And I know you have multiple campuses. Is what you experience walking into a campus like this consistent with your other campuses, or every campus is sort of different, something unique, but largely similar experience?
So it's a great question, and that's something. I've been setting up campuses now in the last many years. In fact, I'm working on a project which is my 6th campus.
Oh, lovely.
And I must tell you, no two campuses look alike because you're going to honor the local community those campuses are serving. You have to honor the teams which are working towards setting up that campus. So there are elements which is true to the local context. But the broad elements of flexibility, adaptability, openness, a lot of natural sunlight, congruence with what learning sciences tell us, you would not find bright colors. You'll only get pastel, natural colors, minimalism, existence of studios, more than just an art lab or a computer lab. We use the word ateliers, which are largely practitioner studios, like the space we are sitting in right now. This is a design thinking studio.
Yeah.
So those elements you would find across campuses.
Okay.
But the treatment of those elements is contextualized to the local community. Like the one we are designing in Pune right now is right by a riverbed.
Oh, wow.
So what happens is that you will find a lot of the elements of the river incorporated in it.
Oh, wow.
So you'll find a lot of elements of greenery, natural sunlight coming in because you have access to those in it. But this campus where we are sitting in right now is right in the middle of Gurgaon with a lot of tall rice buildings. So you'll find kind of a courtyard treatment if you walk in.
Okay.
We've used elements from the traditional architecture of Haveli concept where there are, you walk in, there is a building around.
Central courtyard.
There's a central courtyard.
Yeah.
The purpose of a central courtyard is to give a sense of intimacy, security for young children. And you will not find G+1 and not above. We could have gone 3-4 floors above, but we chose to retain a G+1 to give it an intimate feeling for children when there are a lot of tall rises around, tall buildings around it. So design changes, but the elements remain the same wherever you are.
Awesome. And what I'm hearing is that, like you said, you also visited schools around the world as part of your research. That's like call it primary research. So anyone who's listening and wants to create a space which is unique for themselves has to have that. You get inspired by all the places in India or around the world you visit, but you have to apply the local context.
That's right.
To help them get the best out of that implementation on their campuses. I think that's very insightful.
In fact, I was just to add this point, I have probably visited 65 plus schools.
Oh my God!
In fact, that's one of my hobbies. Just the way we used to collect stamps. Is one of my life's mission is to journal my travels to school spaces, and I continue to do so. And every time I walk into a space, there's something new to learn. In fact, for the Pune project, a lot of it is just our own experience just in the last 3-4 years, the kind of spaces we visited. And I often tell school owners or wannabe school entrepreneurs, I tell them that be very good at copying. In fact, great artists are great
imitators also.
Right? We ruthlessly copy. In fact, great products in the world, be it your iPhones, be it technology product, great institution, great artworks. They're never the originals. The great copycats. They're the best imitators of something which has happened in the past. The story of heritage is like that. So you've shamelessly copied great ideas and we've made it a little more better and given it our own twist, give it a local context to it.
And what they say is that ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the execution where the magic happens, and it seems like that's where heritage appears to be really on point with the execution of that, and like you said, putting in the context of your local environment wherever you're setting up school. So that's certainly very inspiring to hear, and for people to take this back as part of their implementation as well. But let's step back to where it all started. You have an extensive background in management consulting. You're an Harvard alumni. How does one take that, background? And it's inspiring to see top tier university graduates entering into education space, because a common question that people ask, in school or college, how many people want to be teachers or related to education? And not many people raise their hands in that space still. And I guess as an ecosystem, we're all trying to change that narrative.
That's right.
So please share with us what led you to, move towards education from, that sort of a background and in your management consulting experience?
Yeah.
And how has that helped you
So,
take on education?
I always believed, one of the gifts in life is that you should realize what you really want to do early on and build multiple decades, building your competency and capability on that area. So early on in my career, way back in university, I knew that I wanted to be in the field of training.
Okay.
The reason being is that when I was in university, my single most obsession in life was to get through the army. And army has some of you would know, it has one of the more comprehensive multi-day assessment process. They call the
Okay.
Services Selection Board.
Yeah.
If you want to be an officer, you got to clear the exam, which is the easier part. But then you go, you're called into one of their centers and you spend 4 to 5 days and you go through a battery of assessments, which test your leadership capacity, your psychometric profiling, your physical fitness, of course, your teamwork, your other as what they call officer-like qualities. So I spent 2 years training to get through the army as an officer.
Wow.
And I did get through the 72nd course at the Officers Training Academy.
Oh,
I should have
wow.
been a colonel a couple of years back had I stayed in the army. But I met with an accident, which is a blessing in disguise because I realized I'm not the army guy. I'm the long hair, long beard person. But
So you had joined the army. Sorry to interrupt. You had
so
joined
I
the
got
army.
through the army,
Oh, wow.
all set to join. But I met with a road accident where I fractured multiple parts of my left leg.
Okay.
I was medically relegated, so I still had an option to go back to the army after 1 year after the accident.
Okay.
But my batchmates had all become lieutenants and all become captains, so it just didn't make sense for me to go back in it. And by then, I also had realized that I don't think I was made to. I don't think I would fit into the army. I was more of the maverick.
Where did that
field.
realization come from?
So when I met my fellow academy folk, gentlemen cadets as they would call it, I realized that maybe I'm not the person who's going to thrive. I have some very close friends in the army
Okay.
who've done really well.
Yeah.
But I'm more the maverick, the more free-spirited guy. I don't
Yeah.
think I would have survived or thrived well. I would have survived, but I don't think I would have done well. It is not my Swadharma there. But my Swadharma was training, helping people start from point A to reach in point B through structured and unstructured interventions. And I experienced that. I was a nobody had no vision in life. And suddenly this purpose of army really changed me.
Okay.
I chose to delay gratification. I chose to put myself through a grind. I chose to go through the process of transformation. And at the end of it, I realized that I was a changed person. And I thought, oh, this is great. Can I do this for a living? So training became my focus. So I went to a B school with an intent to join the field of leadership development, executive coaching.
Okay.
And that's what I did. On campus, I got through a fancy job in one of the top FMCG companies. And way back, 20 years back, getting through a FMCG company on campus is the goal. You know? But then I didn't take up the offer. I chose to join a small boutique leadership development firm. I stayed with them for 4 years. The company eventually got acquired by a large NYSE-listed consulting firm.
Okay.
And then I moved to the US. I worked with another large consulting firm in the area of leadership development, change management, etc. But as I was working for the consulting firm, my heart still lied with executive coaching,
The training part.
training part of school leaders.
Okay.
It so happened I had an opportunity to train 150 school leaders for a large school group in India.
As part of your consulting gig.
No, it is not. It is a side gig.
Ah.
So all of the side gigs, I was still doing the usual consulting work, but the side gigs took off a lot. So this is the Chinmaya Mission group. They had about 75 schools. They had about 150 school leaders. So my ex-boss, he called up and said, look, I am doing this project, but I need a cheap resource, actually a free resource, who can help me design, co-facilitate this project. So it is a 5-day strategic leadership offsite
Okay.
for about 150 school leaders.
Oh, wow.
And I helped co-design for my former boss. And that became a ritual. Every 5 years, Team Mission used to call us and we used to design this work. Parallelly, I reached out to a lot of school owners down south. They used to call me to do leadership work.
With the teachers or
Teachers, it depends. And I used to say yes to every kind of work as
Okay.
long as I get a footing in K-12 space.
Wow.
in it. And because I never had a reference point of how do I get into training into schools. I used to teach in career launch over the weekends in
wow.
it. So I started with teaching corporate folks, then I moved to higher ed. I realized it doesn't seem to work. Then I started working with, I came down the value chain or the life cycle chain. And I moved to younger children, younger folks, which is K to 12. K to 12 is when I found my calling. I just felt, oh, this space, people listen a bit more than universities would or corporate folks would. So I did a lot of pro bono work. Nobody paid me anything, but I just enjoyed volunteering my time. I've done it for several large schools, chains in Bangalore, in Tamil Nadu, in Delhi. There's one boarding school which I consulted, a very popular one for a couple of years.
Okay.
Right? And that's when in 2008, 2009, I had an opportunity to also do consulting for heritage schools. So heritage was one of my guinea pigs
Okay.
back then. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I just persistently followed up with the owners of heritage schools. Manit, he's a very charismatic guy. So I kept telling him, I can help you do something. He had no clue what he has to do with me. In fact, he often jokes, the first time I met him, it's supposed to be an interview to figure out what I could do. Because by then I thought, why don't I join full time? But I ended up asking so many questions. He had no questions to ask.
He felt like he was interviewed.
Yeah, in fact, after 10 years later, even he often says, when I met you, you asked me more questions than I should be asking. But I don't think they still had any clue what to do with me. I kept persisting. My wife, who's a chartered accountant, luckily was willing to pay the bills. And I was young and stupid. I left a corporate job almost at 1/3 of the compensation. And I joined the heritage schools. And back then the mandate, I was 28.
Okay.
And heritage also just about 3 or 4 years into its existence.
Okay.
It was a small school. But there's a lot of hunger to do something meaningful in the field of education. And that's how I made that shift into K-12. With heritage, it's been 16 years now. And I've started teaching economics and civics from grade 6 to grade 10. I was also head of a school program, head of a senior school. I've done principalship, I've done teaching, I've done corporate roles like the entire branding exercise, change management exercise, crafting the first set of vision, mission, values for the organization. So a lot of the work I ended up doing with the group, and that's how the journey started. In 2016, by then I had this calling to set up my own chain of schools. I had this entrepreneurial bug. And one of the dear friend, not just a colleague. So I had a conversation with him and the family large and said, look, I want to set up something new. It looks like K to 12 schools. There's a lot of opportunities to create more campuses, create more value. And they were generous enough to say that, why don't we do something together? And that's how we started. I moved on to a CEO role.
Okay.
We started a company to consolidate all of the work which we did and also set up more campuses.
More campuses, okay. So that's how the multiple heritage campuses started to
Came in.
evolve.
That's right.
So to
Yes,
speak.
yeah.
Wonderful. How did your, even though it seems like heritage was the first formal, like an education dedicated role, but training had been sort of something you'd been passionate about, and then you did management consulting as well. Did that experience help you in your role as an educator, call it?
Actually, the first 4 or 5 years at heritage schools, I was very conscious that I should taste success, and I was very conscious that the community should find me credible, trustworthy, understanding. They should not see me as a consultant who just been parachuted in it. I have to get on the ground and work with him. A lot of it came from the collaborative form of consulting. I was trained early in my career. I had a lot of experience working with family groups, large conglomerates which are family run, and they wanted to professionalize in it. So I had this experience of working with families, CEOs, owners in different sectors. And that culture of consulting, collaborative form of consulting, I think helped me build credibility, helped me build relationships at the heritage schools as well. And I think that decision for me also to start teaching right from day one of me working in schools also helped. Otherwise, a lot of school principals would say, who's this young kid
Yeah.
who's come and advising me
On how to run a school.
how to run a school or what to do. And it's a legitimate concern people would have.
Absolutely.
If today some guy comes and tells me that, no, I come from this consulting firm and I'm going to help you do this, I'll say, yep, you should start in the classroom first.
Yeah.
Maybe teach a couple of classes and then come to me
Yeah.
in it. And I think I was glad I went through that grind of teaching, heading a school, running a school. I think those experiences helped me later to build credibility.
Do you think it's a prerequisite for people who may be looking into education or being educators, not maybe necessarily just teaching in the classroom, but starting up schools? So because a lot of our listeners may be at the fence of either wanting to get into education, or some of them could be second generation.
That's right.
There's a lot of second generation energy coming into the education space. How they can take the mantle forward, how can they take the journey forward? What advice would you have based on your journey for these stakeholders to succeed in their role?
Of all the school leaders I admire, all of them actually have spent some time in the classroom.
Okay.
And there's no exception. So if you're not a practitioner in the classroom, then every philosophy of education is only a theoretical concept. It's just a philosophy. You really can't convert that into seamless execution.
Okay.
I'm not saying you need to teach full-time given your other commitments.
Yeah.
But teaching a couple of hours every week, at least in the initial few years of your education journey as a school owner or a school leader, you really can't, I don't think you'll understand fully what actually happens in it. In fact, many school owners, I now coach a lot of school owners in my new journey. You can actually make out whether this person really understands education or not. Often, school owners come and operate from their circle of competence, and the circle of competence is not doesn't go beyond technology or administration. You really want to learn about learning, assessments, child development. You got to be in the classroom in it. My professor Linda Nathan at the Harvard University used to tell me, and this is a statement she used to make, you should not start a school before 8 years of teaching.
Wow.
You should not start a school before 8 years of teaching. Of course, I did not teach for 8 years. I probably taught for 5 years.
Yeah.
I would say at least 3 years of teaching is important, especially
and
in the
part-time or
primary
whatever,
level.
like spend some time in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Full-time is impractical.
Yeah.
But 1-2 hours a week, or just take one subject for one class, that is doable.
Yeah.
3 hours.
Whatever
or
you
2
feel
hours.
passionate about, basically,
Yeah.
any subject.
But it should be it can't be a workshop. I also see people doing workshops. I'll do one-off leadership workshop. I'll give a lecture. No. You got to do the entire cycle of lesson plan,
curriculum, lesson planning,
planning with the teachers, delivering it, reviewing the lesson plan, assessment, correcting homeworks.
Yeah.
That's the toughest part.
Yeah.
Given your other commitments, how do you going to finish correcting 30 to 35 notebooks or assessments and give feedback to them? Because if we don't, in a school like Heritage, that kid is going to ask, hey, Mr. Vishnu, I'm still awaiting feedback on the submission I'd made last week. So some of those things you got to come, and then designing assessments at the end of it, giving feedback, PTMs, sitting with the teacher, a parent, and giving feedback on a child's performance. You got to do it for 2-3 years. It is great investment in the long run for you in your own journey.
And even if people feel like they've hired an experienced professional as an entrepreneur in education, it's still a prerequisite, because you'll have a lot more empathy and understanding overall for the challenges that even the professionals that you might have on team will bring on.
So one of the toughest challenges the board of Heritage Schools asked me to, in fact, Manit's own personal, in 2012, 2013, we were not doing really well in our senior school.
Okay.
We were doing great progressive work in primary and middle.
Okay.
But we simply didn't deliver results in grade 10 and grade 12.
Okay.
And a lot of parents said, yeah, all is fine till grade 8. And I think after grade 8, we got to choose another school, a more serious school. So we had a lot of attrition in grade 9, grade 10.
Achha.
In grade 10, I remember in 2012, 50% of a batch left for other traditional schools. It was a slap in our face, you know. You work so hard for so many years, but end of it, parents don't want to stay with you after grade 8. And the board then decided, why didn't we make Vishnu spend 2-3 years? I resisted. In fact, I didn't want to take that commitment of heading a school, let alone a senior school. And by the way, senior school is the most difficult from a culture standpoint.
Okay.
Because kids are grown up.
Yeah.
Parents get so obsessed with examinations. You got to deliver results. And results are more tangible. You just can't get away with stuff. You also have other behavioral challenges in senior school. Bullying, dating, substances, discipline issues. Parents lose trust with kids. And it's a huge challenge to run a senior school. I have tremendous sympathies for a senior school teacher or a senior school principal. It's not easy, given that's the most difficult part of a school. And I was just refusing not to do. And suddenly, I think my then director, Kay Jacob, she's an American. She's now back in the States. She just sent a mail out. I still remember it's a Valentine's Day, February 14th. I was in Singapore visiting the United World College.
Oh, okay.
I'd gone on a study mission to see what are these folks doing. She just sent a mail out to the parent community and teachers. Vishnu's going to take over as the senior school principal. And it is quite a shock. I knew I have to take it, but I thought I'll do it in April, May, June. But she sent it out in
Came sooner
Feb.
than you thought, yeah.
Came sooner than we thought. And I called Kay and said, what did you do? And she said, you'll never take it up if I don't send this mail. The mail is gone. From tomorrow, you are the senior school principal. So they pushed me into it. But it's the most toughest part of my education journey the last decade and a half. But I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
But when I did that, a lot of the senior school teachers didn't accept me. They said, who is this 28, 29-year-old fellow who just come in just because he has an Ivy...
Our experience in teaching is longer than his age.
They're all in their 50s and 60s in it. But what I did was, I had some teaching experience with me. I taught with them. Okay. I corrected homeworks with them. I prepared question papers with them. I sat on PTMs with them. I still was the executive head, but I was also the teacher. And I think a lot of teachers came around. And I could see in the first year there's a lot of resistance. But I told them, look, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to figure out together.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sit with you in the staff room and do the stuff.
Yeah.
I think in the second year, a lot of teachers turned around. And some of them are dear friends even now.
Yeah.
I still remember some of the very senior teachers who are, have 30 years of teaching experience, who've been there, done that. And I remember in the whole staff meetings, they were dead against many things which we wanted to do. But they're dear friends. And they look back and say, yeah, I'm glad we did this.
Yes.
I'm glad we had those conversations. I'm glad we pushed the envelope in it. So, being on the ground with the teachers really helps gain credibility, especially if you don't have gray hair at your back. Yeah.
So I want to ask Vishnu, just sort of key takeaways for our audience who are looking to get into education. What would be your top 3 advice sort of as a summation of your journey so far?
Good question. I think first thing first, understand, I know a lot of landowners, they think running a school is easy. I must tell them no business, of course, is easy. And education is exceptionally complex. Gone are the days, 15, 20 years back, you put a land, you put a building and children just came out in queues. But today it's not the case. Parents have options. So if you want to get into this, understand it is a very complex sector to be in.
Okay.
There are so many humans involved, there are regulations involved. It's not easy to manage 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 parents, and each parent also has a husband and wife. There are grandfather, grandmothers, there are children. It's exceptionally complex. So understand that your journey is going to take at least 7-8 years for you to figure out this sector. Also understand it's a very rewarding experience. I don't know, financially it's going to be rewarding because I'm sure there are other sectors where you can make much more returns on your investment.
Okay.
But it is definitely rewarding in a spiritual sense. It gives a lot of meaning for you and your family. It keeps you younger. It really makes your journey worthwhile. Another takeaway is if you are wanting to set up schools or preschools or higher education, if you want to be in education as an entrepreneur, I think you should figure out who you are to begin with. What I mean is that the school, in some sense, will be an extension of who you are. And if you're not articulated to yourself who you are or what you want to be, then you're not going to do a great job of what kind of school you want to set up or what kind of institution you want to set up. Great schools I've always seen have great founders, and often those great founders have figured out who they are, and that journey has been far more congruent with who they are and what they want to build. I think that's another important figuring out you got to do before you start the school. I think another takeaway is also get the right mentors.
Okay.
This industry or this sector is also very nascent. I don't think there are great prototypes available for a large country like ours.
Yeah.
We still have a very few good schools. For a country of 1.5 billion people, we still have very few good schools for you to look up to. There are very few school mentors. In fact, very good principals are very far and few. Ask any school owner.
Yeah.
It's not the availability of land or capital which is a challenge for their expansion.
Yeah.
It is availability of talent which is an expansion. Because we don't have depth of talent because the sector is still evolving. So for an entrepreneur to set up a good school, I think the right thing is get right mentors to begin with who will provide you with the right context, be a good sounding board, help you articulate the right milestones, etc.
That's awesome. I think that's very interesting. And you talked about talent, and as we progress through this conversation, we're definitely going to talk about talent because that certainly is one of the biggest piece any school owner is looking up to. But I want to switch gears a little bit. The name, Heritage International Experiential. So experiential is obviously a key word and is almost like a call it identity of the school in itself. So I want to, for our audience, understand what does it mean to be an experiential school? If you can just shed some light on that.
I'll talk about why the word experiential in our name.
Yes, of course.
I think early on it is not there. It was just called the Heritage School.
Yeah.
And when I joined the Heritage Group, it is called the Heritage School.
Okay.
In fact, the first project I led was to ensure a common vision and mission statement. So I led a project which involved 600 stakeholders, parents, students, children. We used something called LSIP, large-scale interactive processes.
Okay.
Over a period of 9 months. We had structured conversations and narrowed down what a school stood for. And it became very clear that we want to be a project-based learning school.
Okay.
Right? Because we firmly believed in our own quest and search for a more powerful pedagogical tool to help children build relevant and deep skills and competencies. We felt project-based learning is the right way to achieve that.
Okay.
And then we said, okay, if you want to be a project-based learning school, an out-and-out project-based learning school, as against schools which just does projects like summer projects, winter projects, etc. We said, look, we don't want to have textbooks. We don't want to have regular exams the way traditional schools have. We want real projects, real life projects rooted in the local community, led by children, which are interdisciplinary. Can we use those as the primary pedagogical tool to transact curriculum?
Okay.
Right? And then we, as a community, we decided that can we then rename ourselves
Okay.
as something around experiential. So we said back then it is called the Heritage School, and the caption was an experiential learning school. We kept that. But by 2016, when we decided to set up multiple campuses across the country, one of the problems was that the word heritage was very generic. And also, we wanted to take a bold call to communicate to our prospective parents,
Message within the name.
prospective teachers. It said, look, we're not just a school, we are an experiential learning school. So we decided that to build in more accountability, to ensure that we deliver what we promised, we decided to call ourselves experiential school so that it'll make the community holders accountable. And that's why we rechristened ourselves Heritage Experiential Learning School. Of course, the word experiential does not have an E. It starts with an X.
Yeah.
That is purely a problem of IP issues in India, where it's in India. I think it's IP laws are so frivolous. I remember 5 years back, my team was doing an exercise. We realized we have 22 wannabe heritage schools, and as we speak, I think every year you'll have 1 or 2 heritage schools coming up. There is one Heritage Global just about 7 kilometers from us, 10 kilometers to east of where the school is situated. There is a Heritage International Global School. So there are a lot of combinations.
Yes.
So the lawyer suggested use the word experiential, which is unique. So we just removed the E out of it.
Got it.
I wish we hadn't. But we had to create.
But I think nomenclature is ultimately it's more of a brand play than.
That's right.
And I guess IP laws sometimes drive that. So
but when schools imitate names in small towns, in suburbs, etc., I think as much we get really agonized because it's a nuisance. You have to send a legal notice and they have to go through a change, and it's a process. And there's a team working on it. It is also a lot of pride. Imitation
you're doing something right.
She's doing something right. I remember in 2008, 2009, when the schools were set up, child-centric was the most common thing, right? In all brochures, it's child-centric, then became holistic. But today you see a lot of brochures, it's experiential. In fact, many schools now are wanting to call them experiential as well. Some of the new schools. I was in Maharashtra, Bombay. There's one school which actually calls themselves, I won't say the full name of it, I want to honor the founders of what they want to do, but they call the word experiential comes in the name itself. And I would like to believe we played a small role in the founders wanting to call themselves an experiential school, because today experiential is becoming or getting normalized in conversations now.
What I like about the education community at large is that voluntarily or involuntarily people are getting inspired with each other, and in some ways building more clarity on what they are trying to be and what they're not trying to be. And ultimately it's good for the nation, as that clarity comes along. And if more schools adopt this methodology, ultimately you're leading to better student outcomes at large. So I guess that's the silver lining, call it.
I think generally, if you notice, a lot of quality of schools have actually gone up. Because there's peer learning, there is a certain sense of peer sharing. Talent keeps moving across schools. So I think I would like to believe, compared to what it was 2 to 3 decades back, today the quality of schools are much better in it. Of course, they're more expensive too. From a parent's perspective. But it's also because you pay teachers well today.
Absolutely.
Right? Today, teaching is a viable career opportunity, which is not the case 20, 30 years back. You end up doing teaching because you have nothing else to do. You don't have any other options, or you want a lighter career option. But today, you do know youngsters do want to get into teaching compared to what it was before.
I think and it's certainly getting better, but as an ecosystem, I think we've got a distance to cover.
That's right.
As more and more, even I'm interacting with educators.
That's right.
Aspiration is getting better,
but
it would need to be much higher as an education ecosystem for us to thrive. But you mentioned project-based learning. So just help us understand project-based learning versus experiential learning. Are they the same thing, or they go hand in hand, or they're two different things?
No, there are a lot of overlaps. I mean, for a layman, they're pretty much the same. But if you ask any seasoned educator, seasoned educator overseas, I think in India people still don't understand. Even among teachers, there is a lot of
that's why I figured
confusion.
it'll be
In fact, in every conference, I have a
difference.
slide which actually helps them understand between project-based learning and experiential learning. The difference is this. So, many schools are traditional schools, but they still use projects as one of the pedagogical tools for children to learn. So, even in our own times, you would find you still have the traditional 3-hour assessment exams at the end of the semester or at the end of the year. But the teacher would say, okay, can you do a project over the summer vacation or a winter vacation? Or more recently, let's say in the last 10 years, even traditional schools, as part of regular assessment, they might have, can we do a small project in it? So, which essentially means that a traditional school is using project-based learning as one of the tools of learning and assessment. In an experiential learning school, it is not one of the things, it is the mainstay pedagogical tool, which means that most of the curriculum is transacted through year-long projects, interdisciplinary projects. So it is not just summer or winter vacation. If you come into an experiential learning school, you would have in the timetable X number of hours every week or even every day in some cases, a project's experiential, as we call it expeditions or experiential, a period dedicated for interdisciplinary learning for children to solve that problem or to complete that project.
Okay.
Also, these project-based learning in a traditional context are very short-term, winter, summer vacation.
And
or
they're mostly at home?
They could be at home and mostly parents end up doing it.
Exactly.
Right? Here it is in the school. It is also longer duration.
Okay.
So it runs for 6 months. In fact, in some of our projects, it runs for the entire academic session. And there's a final culmination of it. A simple metaphor to understand a project-based learning is projects are more like deserts. In an experiential learning school, these projects are main course.
Okay.
That's the difference.
But the way they're executed is kind of similar?
No, a lot of difference. Lot of difference. The way in a project-based learning, when a project is delivered, it's at home, short-term. It may not be interdisciplinary. It is about a particular theme. For example, it is not necessarily linked to competencies in it. In a experiential learning school, they are more long-term. It's often authentic project. There's another big difference. In a project-based learning, you might just say, okay, please do a project on the Egyptian civilization. Or the Amazon rainforest system, or the Nile River. In an experiential learning, projects are not abstracts rooted in some past or in a foreign concept.
Okay.
They are rooted in a local community.
Okay.
So even in a history project, we will not do a project on Egyptian civilizations. We'll probably do a project on the local context. It just could be the Mughal dynasty, because you're closer to, in a Delhi context, you're closer to this one. Or you might say, can we, like one of the projects with the heritage schools did was, Haryana actually hosts a lot of the Harappan civilization settlements. A lot of people don't realize that we have one of the oldest settlements discovered just about 40-50 kilometers from Gurgaon.
Okay.
Called the Rakigiri civilization. This one. It is as old as the Mohenjo-daro, etc. So our students went there, they collaborated with the ASI, Archaeological Survey of India officials. They developed guidebooks.
Okay.
For that, right? So it is a history project, but it's not rooted about Egyptian civilization, etc. It is rooted in a local context like the Rakigiri civilization here, or could be the Mughal dynasty, or could be the Hindu kings who are in the Chhatarpur area, etc. So there's a local context to it. Idea is not to teach facts about history. Idea is to help children think like a historian. They're two different things. Once you develop habits for a child to think like a historian, it is so easy for the child to learn about Egyptian civilization. Right? And that's probably the reason why a lot of us hated history in school, but they love history when you're in your 30s and 40s. You start watching all documentaries, read history books.
I think the curiosity is different. At that time, it seemed like I have to memorize this and I don't want to memorize it. I'm just recalling my days. And today it becomes like, oh, really? This is what happened at the time, and how you see that. I guess the worldview changes, and you get more curious, like what had happened in the past.
That's right.
Can there be similarities that you see now?
Right. Yeah.
But help me connect the dots here. Like for us, I mean, a lot of aspirational schools, or call it conventional schools, and like you said, experiential is the buzzword, and while people are trying to put them in their name as well, but there is some real element of people wanting to do that migration from traditional schools, now even the NEP and all the national education policies trying to bring more sort of project-based or experiential learning into the curriculum itself. How does a school which probably has been around for 10, 20, 30 years or even longer, having that legacy or conventional way of teaching, play with the idea of introducing these concepts and nuances of experiential learning into their environments, given the challenge of talent, given the challenge of certain resistance to change, and not just from teachers. Sometimes parents are resistive to this, like, okay, there's no homework, there's no this thing. What are you guys doing?
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
how does one play with that idea into their local communities?
You know, it's more difficult to do this in an old school than set up a new school.
Of course.
In fact, in my time in this sector, I've worked with existing schools as well as setting up new campuses. I always feel it's more easier to set up a progressive school than change an existing one.
You're more in control that way.
Yeah, because schools are also very complex systems. There is collective institutional memory gets built over a period of time, and to unpeel it,
Yeah.
it's very painful
Yeah.
in it. And I mean, hats off to leaders who are the task of actually bringing about change in old, established, and often successful schools. The problem with some of the legacy schools is that they've been perceived as successful. And anything successful, there's no incentive to change,
Yeah.
in it, right? And that's probably one of the reasons why you find there is a fall in the relevance of some of the marquee legacy boarding schools. Because back in 3 decades back, they were seen as,
Gods of education.
gods of education. There's leadership, leaders were born there.
Yeah.
But today, I don't think that halo is there. In fact, some of the city-based day boarding schools probably attract far more better talent, far more high-quality parents than boarding schools would do, because boarding schools would find it very difficult to change. Some of them do. And I have tremendous respect for some of these names. But they've not kept pace with what some of the schools in cities have been able to do, especially schools which are set up in the last 15
The newer age
years.
schools are
They've done
way
a
ahead of that
phenomenal-
game. Yeah.
Yes, they've done a phenomenal job of it. But to answer your question, if a school has to embark on change, how do they do it? I would recommend starting small. Fortunately, now I think any curriculum, any national level curriculum, the NEP, for example, does provide a lot of latitude to do meaningful learning experience for children. Unfortunately, the CC, the Continuous and Comprehensive Evaluation, which wasn't in place till a few years back, which recommended more formative assessment, more real-life learning, it kind of wound back. We are not big fans of those. I wish the CC continued in it, but of course bound back for several other reasons. So the curriculum provides, the board provides opportunities, take advantage of those. Start small, don't have to start experiential learning in all subjects. Maybe encourage in a few subjects, like subjects like history, subject like sciences, for example, subject like language, for example, does provide opportunities to do real life learning. Math is the most difficult to provide experiential learning because math is abstract by nature, but you don't have to do math. You could actually start with social sciences. You can start with some of the natural sciences like chemistry, physics, for example. Language is a great place to start. Any project can always be a combination of one social science or science and one language.
Yeah.
Right. You could start small. Makerspace is a great way to bring in experiential learning. The space this was set up in 2014, long before Atal Tinkering Labs made Makerspace popular.
Okay.
We in fact back then had talent imported from UPenn, because that's one of the few schools even now which actually has a master's program for makerspace and design thinking.
Interesting.
We had folks from IDEO, formerly Stanford University, helping us craft the first set of curriculum here. But makerspace is a great way to integrate experiential learning as well. The school owners, school leaders often say, hey, our parents don't understand these things. My answer to them is, if you help parents see student products, if you help parents see the final outcome of the student projects they do, and help students present those projects, I think parents will become big fans of it. They just need to see what students have created. When a grade 4 kid creates a prototype of anything, could be, a soundproof library reading system. Like, we set up a new building and we had children set up defined products to measure the sound levels in the library.
Oh, wow.
Right, or dispensing sanitary pads in the restrooms, for example, or counting or setting up fire alarms, for example. Those are products, and these are products which children built, and they were presented by students to parents. And imagine the parents' pride.
Yeah.
Wow, I couldn't do this in my engineering days. My grade 5, grade 6 kid could create a monitor to measure sound levels in libraries. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's where the need for starting small would be, that you're able to control that environment, showcase to the parents, build trust.
That's
That
right.
hey, if you believe in this system, this is going to be not a one-off thing. This is something that you're going to see more often.
That's
and I
right.
guess that would help them sort of increase the scale from there. I think
Yeah.
that should be very helpful. You talk about neuroscience as part of your learning and expertise. How has that helped designing what you're doing at Heritage that people can learn from to bring into their environments?
A lot of our work, at least my own personal journey, has been informed by our own understanding of brain sciences. It's a nascent field. It's only about 10, 15 years old, but it's a growing field. A lot of things which an experienced teacher intuitively understood, like role of emotions, role of fear, some of the other neurological conditions, like attention deficiency disorders, for example, being in the spectrum, neurodiversity, different aptitudes to learn, etc. A lot of myths, for example, that there's a popular myth that there are learning styles. Actually, that's not true at all.
Okay.
There's also a myth that left brain, right brain. Actually, that's not true at all.
Really?
So some of those things I got informed because of my own interest and my own formal exposure to cognitive neuroscience. It's not neuroscience, it's cognitive neuroscience.
Okay.
It's the overlap of brain, how brain learns, and also the science of learning.
Okay.
It's a very nascent field. Today it's getting popular. In fact, a lot of curriculum developers today would have some background of cognitive
In
neuroscience.
cognitive neuroscience.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Even a space design, for example, a lot does inform you. Role of sunlight, oxygen levels, for example.
Okay.
Colors, impact of colors. Like, for example, it is a myth that primary school should be really colorful. When I walk into some of my friends' homes, and parents in all good interest, decorate the child's bedroom with a lot of colors. Actually, cognitive neuroscience tell you colors is very dangerous for kids because it kind of makes
distracting them.
it distracting, it's cluttering, it really shoots up your energy levels. It doesn't help you focus, right? Pastel colors, Scandinavian colors are far more nicer, far more supportive in a child's learning journey. So some of those things really helped.
That's
I
very
still do every year a course on, it's called Nurturing the Nascent Brain. I think there's also a MOOC on it now. Every year I have about 1,000 parents attending it on what do parents need to know about the way brain learns.
So your school does this workshop for parents, or it's an
open workshop. We
open
cannot
available
do it.
that you guys recommend for parents to
Parents do it, and it's an online course.
Got it.
People enroll in it. We started in 2018.
Okay.
But it became very... earlier I used to do this for just 20-30 parents who turned up.
Acha.
Because it's also a commitment of one day and they got to stay. But now it's become a module. It's a 4-hour session.
Who conducts this?
I do it, but we also have a lot of fellow teachers who do it as well.
So it is available and it is done by Heritage, basically.
Yeah, it's done by Heritage. I also do it in my personal capacity.
Acha, okay.
Anybody who asks me, I'll be happy to run that course. But I also started a not-for-profit trust called Center for Conscious Parenting.
Okay.
Way back in 2018, when my daughter Mira was born,
Yeah.
my own journey as an educator got shifted to a parent. So I started looking a lot of research from a lens of a parent. And I converted a lot of the learnings, and eventually I led to developing a module itself for parents. In it. And then we said, why don't we create an organization which curates good content for parents.
Oh, wow.
So we do in a year, I think we do about 13 or 14 workshops. And
These
of
are
course,
virtual workshops?
These are virtual workshops. There are some physical in-person workshops as well. But during COVID, of course, the virtual format became very popular.
Yeah.
I think what we're doing right now
Is part of a virtual...
It's part of the virtual acceptance as a medium of learning in itself. So we started doing these online thing. It's called Center for Conscious Parenting, CFCP. And there are some flagship courses. And one of the flagship courses is also Nurturing the Nascent Brain, which is just about informing what does brain science tells us about for nurturing young children.
Oh, interesting.
There's also a version for teachers,
Okay.
which is a full credit course I do in some of the teaching colleges.
Okay.
Too. We talk about how does memory get formed, a role of emotions, how language is built, how do brains learn mathematics, for example, adapting pedagogical practices around neuroscience itself. So that's for the teachers.
So I want to ask you, given your background in, cognitive neuroscience, and it seems like, it's a tool that teachers can use quite effectively. What would be your sort of suggestions that teachers can use to help it be more, get more attention from their students in the classroom environment? That would be very insightful for people to hear.
So, cognitive neuroscience is not a tool. It's essentially a science of how the brain learns, and understanding that science would be helpful. It's like if you want to design a glove, you got to understand how the hand works.
Yes.
And similarly, if you're going to design a lesson plan or a learning experience, you got to understand how the brain learns.
So yeah, what strategies I guess teachers
Yes.
can use?
Yeah,
from
and
this?
the objective of understanding these is also not to get the child's attention.
Okay.
The key objective of any learning experience is engagement.
Okay.
Is the child engaged in the learning process? Is a child taking self-initiative to be the leader of his or her learning journey?
Okay.
Or is it teacher-led?
Huh.
If it's teacher-led, it's a passive form of learning. The brain really doesn't have any agency in it. But if the child takes the agency, the child takes the leadership to learn, then there is a certain engagement which happens, and hence learning sticks in the long run. And to answer your question, what could be some of the things teachers should know about the brain sizes? One, I think the role of emotions in learning. Nature has designed the brain in such a way that the gatekeeper of emotions is right next to the organ which actually forms memory.
Okay.
So there's something called amygdala and there's something called hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part which records any information which comes in and translates into memory. But it is right next to something called amygdala. Amygdala is the gatekeeper of emotions. So whenever positive emotions come, your memory formation works really well. But when the brain experiences negative emotions, then forget about curtail learning experience. The learning part shuts down. There's no learning happens. You become as what they call the fight, flight, or freeze syndrome. Remember, our brains are not designed to be in a classroom. Brains are designed to survive in the African savannas. The brain still thinks you are in the African savanna. But we are not in such a situation. We are in a modern day classroom where there is no... So any form of stress, that could be stress through bullying or a father and mother fighting, lack of breakfast in the morning, even small things like, many families, the father and mother hurrying the child to get into the school bus or to get dropped, you're eternally late. All of those are stress. The brain can't differentiate between a stress of coming late to school as against running from a tiger.
Okay.
It's all the same stress. It's all still the same neurochemicals processing. The hippocampus and amygdala are still responding to the same thing. Once in a while you come late, the brain knows how to adapt because brain are designed to take up stress. But late coming is every day. It becomes what we call chronic stress.
Okay.
And when chronic stress happens, your hippocampus actually shrinks. In fact, there is a lot of research which tells you children who go through stressful families for several reasons, economic, social reasons, bullying, lack of a passing of a dear one, conflicts at homes, all of those actually when children go through for longer period of times, the hippocampus shrinks in size.
Oh wow.
Not just temporarily, permanently.
Permanently.
So for long you have children not being able to learn well. I'm not surprised in a country like India where there's a lot of poor population who have not had sufficient nutrition, sufficient safety, and sufficient social security while growing up. They have curtailed memory power, intellectual capacity even longer. In fact, it's very common in India. You often find a lot of adults who are helping in our homes, who are working as security guards, etc., they may not necessarily be able to think. They're not able to do basic instruction following. A lot of the reasons could just be poor nutrition, exposure to stress when they're growing up. So educators have to recognize that stress is a emotional regulation is a huge part of learning process itself. So the primary job of an educator is actually not teaching, is managing, helping children manage emotions, right? Even if they come from well-to-do families, simple stressors like late coming, lack of routine in their homes, father-mother fighting, bullying is a great source of stress, exclusion.
Yeah.
One of the things which often happens in modern or urban school classroom settings is a birthday party happens and a child is not called.
Yeah.
Research tells you the part of the brain which lights up in children, because you can do fMRI scans and know which part of the brain lights up or not. When children are not invited to social gatherings, the part of the brain which lights up in children is the same part of the brain which lights up when you're facing a tiger or a snake.
Wow.
Right? So exclusion is as real as facing near-death experiences for children.
Wow.
Right? So teacher's job is to ensure that when a birthday party happens, all children are invited. In fact, our school has a norm that if you do a birthday party, you call everybody, others don't do one. There is no thing like I'm going to call only my best friends.
Yeah.
I'll call 10 people and I'll exclude 5, etc. So that's one thing. So role of a teacher is emotion. If you don't manage emotion, there's no learning. Learning is secondary, right? The second, I think, a very critical understanding educators and parents should have is that brain has critical / sensitive periods to learn. Okay. There's certain things brain is predisposed to learn in certain age. If you cross that age, it's very difficult for that brain to learn. Critical thing is social behaviors.
Okay.
Norms of how do I behave in a social context. Those are best learned before age 6.
Oh,
if you don't correct those before age 6, they will be problematic adults, not just problematic children all through their lives.
Wow.
Right. Second is music, for example. If you don't learn a music before puberty or language before puberty, it's very difficult to learn later.
Learn afterwards.
It's not that you can't learn a language or music later on. It just gets very difficult. Even if you learn, you will never be as natural as a child who has learned these things before puberty, right? So there are certain things I think children should be exposed to. Multiple languages, multiple music formats, etc. before certain time frames in a child's life. Brain is more disposed to learn by then. The third very important thing which I think educators and parents should know is brain is plastic, which means we call it neuroplasticity, which means that it is malleable and can adapt at any point in time.
Okay.
As much as I said there is critical and sensitive periods, it's not the brain can't learn, it just takes more effort.
But the level of ease changes, but it still can be done.
It still can be done. The brain. One of the things which I really felt about cognitive neuroscience is it liberates you with the idea that you can learn anything whenever you want to.
That's
it just
amazing.
takes effort. All it requires two things: time and space. You need time, space, and effort. Of course, when it happens,
commitment has to be there.
You're able to learn. So no child can be said, "Oh, this child can't do it." It's just about providing the right context, scaffolding, support that the child will be able to learn or master in it. In fact, more than understanding the truths about brain, I think cognitive neuroscience also informs educators and parents about neuromyths.
Okay.
There is a lot of myths we have about the brain. Like one of the things we have is brain is a bucket to be filled, right? And that is why there is a knowledge dispenser and a knowledge consumer. And I just pass on as if I'm lighting. It doesn't work that way, right? Another thing is there's a left and a right brain. Oh, some children are left brain, right brain. That's so not true. There's no ounce of research which tells you that there is left brain and right brain.
So students are not aligned to a left brain or a right brain
not at all,
by
not
default.
There are left hemispheres and right hemispheres.
Okay.
But these are what they call, if you go Google neuromyths, you'll get a lot of research papers around it. For some strange reason, some of these myths persisted. These metaphors persisted.
Okay.
That left brain people are all more logical, right brain or more creative. That's not true. In fact, it is not true at multiple levels. It is not true at the level of understanding what creativity or logic is. Actually, there's an art to logic also.
Okay.
Great scientists are artists. Similarly, great artists are logical thinkers, right? A Da Vinci's masterpiece, there's a certain logic and rhythm and aesthetic science behind it, and that is why it's a masterpiece, right? A right brain creative person is logical at some sense. Similarly, a highly logical person has a certain rhythm, has a certain aesthetics to it. So, when you look at fMRI scans of even logical calculations, you would find the brain is getting used in its entirety. There's nothing on left or right brain.
Okay.
Right. So that's again a myth. And what is funny is when people say, "Oh, this is a left brain child, this is a right brain child." No, it's not. Please don't brand them.
I always thought it that
If you
way,
connect
but
the
that's
previous
amazing.
point I made, that brains are plastic.
Yeah.
A child could be very artistic when they're young, but for all you know, the child can actually do some very complex logical arguments later on, and vice versa also. So don't brand this one.
Because the branding communication actually limits the child thinking along that
Absolutely.
way. Yeah.
In fact, I know a lot of school products, parenting products on left brain, right brain. It doesn't. It's one. Another big myth is the idea of IQ. Right? So okay, there's a high IQ,
High
low
IQ.
IQ in it. First of all, IQs were designed 100 years back.
And in a different country.
In the
context,
US
yeah.
largely to catch children who are not being able to do some regular task, right? So it is done to measure a narrow band of human existence. That is why there's no correlation between high IQ and success in life, right? In fact, high IQ is a curse because high IQ means you're dysfunctional to do many other things, right?
Okay.
So parents often say, okay, my child is intelligent, but you need to ask yourself, what does intelligence mean? Is it a narrow band called IQ? Or is it general intelligence, which actually includes emotional, social, leadership, reflection, understanding disciplines, making capacity to make interrelationship connections between two different disciplines? Those are more important, fluid intelligence as we call it. But you can't measure those things.
Yeah.
Right? You can only measure it when you actually produce a project, when you produce a task. And that is why I'm a big fan of project-based learning, because it helps you create artifacts which are more accurate assessments of children's capacities than a narrow definition called intelligence or an IQ test, etc. Yeah.
Wow. That's very insightful. I want to switch gears to, obviously we talked about suggestions for teachers. Let's talk about how to develop our teachers. So, building leadership and bringing innovation to schools. In your role, I know, you've been involved in strategic planning and, continuous improvement at schools and setting up new schools. Can you talk about your experience in either finding the talent obviously school is largely dependent on the teachers that are basically the way of the schools communicating that message or ideologies of the school to the students. How do you develop that talent at a place like Heritage? And then we'll talk more about that.
I often joke that the heritage schools were created not to help children learn, but to actually help adults learn, and children are just an excuse. So our own view is our schools are there for adults, that includes teachers and parents, to get together, to learn and evolve as better human beings. And children are just an excuse for us to get together, right? So at the heart of heritage schools was ensuring that leaders, when individuals come in, they grow in with the school, not just in their capacities to be a better teacher or better leader, but also as a better human being.
Okay.
In fact, one of the wonderful things to be in the education sector, and I know a lot of teachers would agree with me, is that working with children just makes you better human beings in the long run. Right? But schools like Heritage, we systemize it. We ensure that we start with the premise that you're not going to get great teachers, right? You get great human beings. It is the school starts to make them great teachers, right?
So there is a process to identify the right human beings.
Yeah, you need to find the right human beings who are passionate about learning, who are passionate about life itself, who are passionate reflectors.
Okay.
Great teachers are actually, to begin with, are great reflectors. They're reflective of their practice, right? our task is not to look at good teachers. Our task to identify good learners, good human beings. Teaching, we can teach them. That's not the problem. And India has a challenge of good teaching availability. I don't
Okay.
think we have, as a country, created a depth. The way we've created a depth in certain sectors, I don't think we have a great depth in teaching.
Okay.
It's very difficult. Schools like Heritage have not expanded to 10, 20 campuses. We're still, for 20 years of existence, we only created about 5 campuses.
Yeah.
And out of the 5, actually 4 came in the last 4-5 years.
Yeah.
So we were just single campuses for many, many parts of our existence. The reason is we just don't have enough talent. It's not the lack of capital or land, it's a lack of talent in itself. So schools like Heritage survive because we have a good training system, we attract good people, we train them over a period of 1 to 2 years, and then you help them become better educators. To the point, the Heritage schools also started their own teacher residency programs. It's called I Am a Teacher. My colleague Smriti, who founded and runs, it's one of the best programs I have seen, where individuals who only need to have a passion for teaching, they join the program, where just the way doctors learn in a hospital through a residency program, lawyers and chartered accountants learn by interning in a place. Teaching should also happen that way. Unfortunately, our B.Ed colleges, they are only theoretical. There is very little practice. And this is not in India. I mean, around the world, there's several research papers which tells you most B.Ed colleges has very little to do with teaching practice. There's more of a cognitive and academic exercise where you learn theories and write an exam. Very few institutes around the world, and India has a few of those, where there's more focus on practice than on theory. A residency model focuses a lot on real practice, where you go teach in a class, there's a master teacher giving you feedback, just the way you would learn. You don't learn tennis or violin or piano by learning theory.
Learning, yeah.
You sit with
have
a
to do
coach, you practice, and the coach gives you feedback, you improve, work on that feedback, and you do better and better and better. That's how teaching should be, and that's how Heritage builds their own teachers. But our challenge is actually not even creating teachers, it's actually teacher leaders. You just don't have enough high quality school principals, coordinators, vice principals, heads of programs who actually can run an experiential learning school. That is a big challenge.
What qualities do you look for in those type of leaders?
Leaders who actually feel they don't have all the answers. The problem with a lot of school leaders is they think they have all the answers. They're so sure, right? That's very dangerous. Because education and learning is very complex. If you have all the answers, I'll probably run away from that leader. Right?
Wow.
We love leaders who have the humility to say that I don't have all the answers, I'm going to figure it out. But they have the discipline of figuring it out in a structured manner, in a time-bound manner, right? Second is we look for leaders who have a deep passion for grooming other leaders. Schools are all about helping teachers develop. Because if you're not a learning organization, you're not going to do a good job of helping children learn. So teachers have to be the first learners. And for teachers to be first learners, the principals have to be first learners. They should be able to facilitate an environment where everybody is learning together, right? So we love leaders who have a deep passion for helping teachers learn. That's another criteria which we look at. Third, they need to be systemic. Even if you have the first two conditions, that I'm somebody who's passionate about helping leaders develop, somebody who's humble and curious enough to learn, but if they're not systemic in the way they run an institution, then everything falls flat. We see a lot of leaders who are high on philosophy, high on talk, but very poor on execution.
Execution
right?
becomes a challenge.
So that's when you need a systemic view how things run. So your capacity to collect the right data, your capacity to hold teams accountable, your capacity to follow through projects. Some of those things have to come in. And it's not easy to have all of these things in a leader. And that is why we never look for leaders who are arrived. We actually look for leaders who are work in progress.
So it's more like growing from within.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because to know that kind of information, you couldn't possibly evaluate all of that in any sort of an interview process.
Right. That's right.
It is something that you would probably have year over year reviews and understand that what are your strengths, what are your challenges, areas of improvement, and sort of work from there.
That's right.
So, is the trick to or the solution that don't hire out? but try to grow from within?
Absolutely. There's no two ways around it. I'm not the only person who's moved up the ranks and done several things.
Okay.
I've spent 16 years, but I've never felt I've done the same thing. I've probably would have done 7 or 8 different things across my 16 years in this at the heritage schools. And I think all, not just heritage, I know a lot of good schools. They are great schools because their leaders are all grown from within.
Wow.
In fact, schooling is one sector where you can guess the quality of a school based on the depth of its bench strength.
Yeah.
And often that bench strength is ingrown. You can't just plant an experienced teacher from outside, experienced principal from outside, and there is no guarantee they will succeed in it. In fact, one of the things we are very proud of the heritage schools, we've also exported a lot of principles.
I was getting to that.
We were just the way Hindustan Levers or Wipros is the CEO of factory. We also take a lot of pride that a lot of our early founding members
have now grown out to
and now
become
our school
head
head.
of
I was in
schools.
Hyderabad last week for a conference.
Yeah.
And one of the individuals is the principal of a top school in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
And she was one of the founding members. I was so happy and proud to see some of our I get reference calls from prospective school owners, board members, headhunters. Hey, this teacher of yours who's worked with you 10 years back is now applied for a vice principal role. It's so nice to hear those calls that some of those folks are now.
Does it
become
ever
school
happen
leaders.
that an existing teacher's reference calls come your way?
Happens. You do get, this world is very small. It do happens. But we've never been, if somebody wants to go out for a leadership role, like I had a colleague of mine who I've worked with her for 12 years or 13 years. I deeply admire her for what she's created.
Yeah.
She got an offer to head a school in Japan.
Oh, wow.
And of course, at the meeting, I mean, she came in for the meeting. I knew this conversation is going to be about she moving out, but I didn't know where she was going. But 2 minutes into the conversation, she said, look, this is the school and this is in Japan. I mean, we had the trust and she shared where she's going. I didn't even try convincing her to stay, but I said,
It's
please
great.
go.
Yeah.
Because it's so, if we get to know, I'm not just talking for myself, I know a lot of my colleagues also would do the same. If we get to know this individual wants to go somewhere else, if we know that place is going to serve her need, her quest for growth and learning, we'll gladly help.
Wow.
A lot of the top principals in Delhi NCR, you'd name the top 5 schools, they would have spent some time at heritage schools.
That's an amazing place to be, and I guess that adds to the pride that you were talking about earlier. But let me flip this back. Like we talked about, what educators are, or school owners are looking for in teachers. There will be teachers listening in the audience, and every teacher aspires to move up, upward mobility, or call it creating a larger impact into the organization structure of the school. What should they be doing to really progress in their careers, in not just teaching, but playing a larger role at schools to find that leadership path for themselves? How can they step up their game to be in a sort of a path to leadership, if you may?
It's a very good question. The reason is, this sector is opening up a lot now.
Yeah.
It's not the case 10 years. Like when I wanted to get into education, I didn't have much options.
Yeah.
I just had an iDiscovery at that point in time. Ashish is a great mentor. I think he, 2 decades back, I think he showed the way for many people like us to move, how to successfully transition from a corporate to a K-12 school sector. But not many options. There was there's iDiscovery, there was the Asim Premji Foundation, and there are some meaningful schools like the heritage schools.
Yeah.
But today, if I have to relive my life in my 20s, I have 10 options right now. So in that sense, it's a great opportunity for educators who are just starting their careers. But for you to get the right opportunity, especially in a leadership role, my number one advice would be just be available.
Okay.
Don't stick to what you're teaching in the classroom. Be that person who says, hey, I need more work. I know I'm teaching. Raise your hand. Be available. And I often say this, if I look back, the leaders who have done really well in the heritage schools and have gone out and done wonderful things outside as well, those are the people who just volunteered for everything, not for
Yeah.
pay, not for recognition. In fact, they never go. In fact, heritage schools, the coordinators who do more work, they stay back and they have to carry the load. They don't get paid more. Of
Yeah.
course, they get paid more eventually.
Yeah.
But the first 1 year, you got to just show up. And folks who have showed up, raised their hand, done things which is not part of their standard job description. They've not complained. They've stayed back, gone beyond the call of duty, purely with an intent to learn. They have done exceptionally well. Opportunities come their way.
Wow.
So remember, all schools, school boards, school owners are hungry for school leaders.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there is not a good there's not great supply of good talent in the leadership level. They need good people who have has a good track record, etc. And the only way they can do is invest in people who are showing up. So don't be the teacher who's keeps saying, no, this is my work, I'm going to do this, but I've taught for 10 years, so I'm eligible to be a coordinator. No, just because
tenure in the ecosystem doesn't make you qualified
Absolutely.
for leadership, and that's the biggest mistake anyone makes.
and that's just not in teaching, that's true of any other sector. But in
Exactly.
teaching, what happens, unlike in other sectors, typically you get a promotion 2 years, 3 years. Even you don't do much, you keep moving around. In schools, it's a fairly stable organizations. It's a pyramid. There's only one principal. There are only 4 or 5 coordinators, and then there's the pyramid is more wider at the bottom, right? If you're doing the same thing for 10, 20 years, you don't have 20 years experience.
Yeah.
You have 1 year experience 20 times.
20 times. Oh, interesting.
You don't have 20 years experience. As against a teacher who's not just taught for 3-4 years, but also experimented different pedagogies, taken on new subjects, new grades, new roles.
They're more versatile that way.
More versatile. They have 20 years experience. Right. So people who work with me, this Pune project, I have this dear colleague I've worked for more than 10 years now. This person has done everything in a K-12 school other than working with architects and designing.
Wow.
Right. And in my conversation a couple of days back, I said, look, that's a black spot now for you. It's a blind spot now. And that person, look, I'm not comfortable doing that. I don't know how. I've been an educator. I don't know how to, negotiate, do procurement. And I said, that's the learning. And we're all with you.
Yeah.
There is a margin to make mistakes. There is a scaffolding to avoid mistakes. Just go at it. Spend 1-2 years. Be vulnerable. Make mistakes. You'll learn. So my suggestion is, if you want to capture the opportunities that is emerging in K-12 space in the next decade or so, show up, be available, raise your hand.
So, I want to switch gears to, you have a personal connection with inclusive education as a father. How has that experience sort of shaped your perspective on building inclusive environments in schools? I would love to hear that.
In fact, in my case, it happened the other way around. Just to give a context, my daughter Meera is a child born with Down syndrome.
Okay.
She's 7 years of age. But even way before she was born, in my time in the heritage schools, the heritage has always been an inclusive school.
Okay.
One of the visionary things the founder family did is that they started a enrichment center way back in 2004, 2005. And back then it was not a norm to have an enrichment center, to be an inclusive school. Even now, most schools in the country are not inclusive schools. Heritage in that sense actually led the way for many schools.
It's like
to
part
do.
of the DNA from day one.
Day one. In fact, so when I started learning the ropes and getting exposed to how a school functions, children with different learning types, learning needs, neurodiverse children was a norm for me. And so when Meera was born, I was not too taken aback, or it was not a setback. I just viewed it as, okay, a child with different learning needs, and I need to adapt my expectations, the way I would need to be with a parent. Of course, there are some medical issues which you need to address to at the hospital level.
Yeah, of course.
But beyond that, I think Heritage prepared me and my wife very well to accept a child who has different learning needs in it. But inclusion is a reality, especially in today's world, where we start appreciating the power of multiple voices, multiple perspectives. neurodiversity is also important, not just diversity of race, ethnicity, perspective, caste, socioeconomic context, but even the way your neural brains are wired is also a diversity one
Yeah.
needs to appreciate. You're going to have children who are going to be in the spectrum tomorrow in your workplace. You're going to have a lot of high achievers are actually wired very differently. You can't call them or you can't exclude them because the world would be a very poorer place. There's high probability that you will encounter people of different types, varieties, perspectives in your workplace.
And
right?
parents play a huge role in building that environment as well.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the strong pillars of heritage, as I understand, is a strong parent community.
That's right.
And sometimes you hear, school owners and teachers also struggle with that support that they may be needing from the parents. For the school owners and the parents listening in the audience, how does one, have the parents be good advocates for their schools? That would be an insight that would be great to hear from you.
See, moment a parent decides to be a part of a school, then they are partners. I often say, especially in some of these new schools in big cities, there are parents who view school as a customer-client
Sure.
relationship because I pay the fee,
I expect a service.
services,
Yeah.
right? But I would say no. Then a school like Heritage School is not your good choice. There are other school options. Here we are partners. My professor used to say it's the relationship of an institute and a parent is called PILE. Partners in a learning environment. Of course, I don't like the acronym, but the crux is that you are partners. We are in a long-term journey, and we are not a client-customer relationships. Of course, you end up paying fees, and the school provides a certain support in the interest of the child. But we are partners in this, which means if a mistake happens on either ways, there should be certain accommodation possible, a benefit of doubt, assumption of positive intent. And a certain mindset of ownership. So if something goes wrong in the school, it's not just the school's job to solve it. It is the parents' problem also. We have to collectively find a solution to it. And that's always, that is my view of a good school environment. That where parents and school, both of them think that they're partners and they work together in the interest of the child. But unfortunately, there are schools which don't treat parents that way. Right? Many schools, to meet a principal, it's easy to meet the prime minister than to meet the principal,
Yes.
right? Of course, rightfully so. A life of principal is also not easy. It's very, very difficult and demanding. But I think schools can also be more involving, more transparent, and more accommodating parents into the way school is run. Like there are schools where parents play a big role the way school is run, right? There are parent volunteers. Like in Heritage, a lot of the key leaders are all from the parent community.
Acha.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we actually build our entire top leadership in the central office. They were all parents. They experience the community through their children. They really like
They're
the community.
recruited to be team members.
And then they eventually apply to join the school.
Wow.
In fact, key positions open up in our school. We send an email to the parents first. These positions are open. Are you willing to join us?
That's amazing.
Yeah, especially in positions like advocacy, technology, some of the corporate functions. Parents are the best advisors. Human resources, for example, talent assessment.
What
for
a
example.
great way of recruiting vested stakeholders.
So they're owners in the community,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think that's very, very critical for me. So, and as a parent, I would like to be part of a school like that.
Yeah.
Where school allows me to have a say in the way school is run. The school allows me to be a part of that community in some way, where I'm able to be. See, in the West, fortunately, most of the societies have very vibrant public spaces. Most parents are part of the local town hall.
Town halls, yeah.
You have a say in the way the town is administered or your suburb is administered.
Public school system is like
The
amazing.
public school system is there. So you have a say in the way the public school is run. You volunteer in the local initiatives.
Yep.
You're expected to, as a citizen, to be a part of it. In India, people like you and me or parents, right, don't have spaces for public participation. And my strong view is schools have to play that part, right? Of course, we're not public schools. So even private schools should allow that space for you to come. The room right behind us is actually a parent cafe.
Okay, yeah.
The original vision was that parents don't have a public space other than malls and coffee shops, but can they get together, meet other parents, so that they can collaborate some work or volunteering for the school? So that's why this cafe. Now this cafe is there in every new school, not the old schools, but any new school we are setting up.
I'm seeing it.
There is a parent cafe, and you come to a parent cafe typically in the starting of the school or during when big events happen. You'll find 10, 15 parents sitting with the teachers or with fellow parents, collaborating and figuring out what next to happen. So I think a great school is where it's able to provide that public space for parents to get together.
And stepping beyond, classrooms and all, and parents, technology is increasingly changing the dynamics of all sort of engagement and relationships and all. And there's a lot being said at every conference you go to around country, like, AI, and everyone's has two cents to talk about it. So I won't get into too much detail on how AI is not a risk to teachers. It's a collaborative tool. And I think it's pretty well noted that AI is here to help and make your work easy, whether it is lesson planning and all of that. But I do want to understand from you how educators can bridge that gap from maximizing the use of AI and the human connection element of it. How can they take AI capabilities and leverage AI capabilities and still build good human connections in their environments?
I must tell you that no conference today happened without the word AI.
Exactly.
In one of the recent conferences, I actually put a slide called just AI. And I told the audience, look, I'm not going to talk about AI, but you've seen the word. Now that you trust me that this conference slides or the presentation I'm making is valid enough for you, because AI is also a buzzword.
Yeah.
Nothing gets consumed without the word AI
Yes.
in it. But I must tell you, teaching is one of the spaces or sectors in which I think AI will transform tremendously. I do believe that AI will reorient the model of teaching, not just teaching, even schools in itself. That it is going to go change. Bill Gates once said, which I think is a very powerful thing, he said, you often overestimate in the short term and underestimate the long term.
Yes.
Right? So that's what's going to happen in AI. So a lot of the promises of AI in the short term may not happen. Like, for example, AI was touted that it's going to replace the teacher. It's going to make life easier for children. I don't think that's going to happen in it. But it definitely can make life easier for teacher, provided the teacher knows how to use it.
Yep.
But in the long run, don't underestimate it. For all you know, you will not have schools the way it operates. This business model may not even survive in another 10 years. You don't need so many teachers, right? So the role of the teacher, it's not that teachers will become redundant. I don't think that's going to happen. But the role of a teacher definitely is going to change.
Yeah.
So the teacher who is not adapted will get redundant.
Yeah.
Somebody said beautifully that teachers won't lose jobs, but teachers who don't have the right skills will lose jobs.
Yeah.
Right? So my argument today is that teachers must know how to leverage AI. That's one. Two, also recognize the long-term trend that children will depend on you less and less for knowledge. They don't need you for knowledge. Your role is not to transmit knowledge. They probably know much better on topics which they care about, even before you start teaching that lesson.
Yeah.
So, which means that teacher has to figure out, what is my role here? My role is to actually be custodian of what is right news and wrong news. That's a very important skill. I don't think AI is going to teach you that.
Yeah.
What is fake, what is right, what is sustainable, what is true, what is not. Right? So they might just be the custodians for those conversations.
Yeah.
They're all a custodian of values. They're custodians of culture. They are also custodians of ensuring that deep engagement happens.
Yeah.
Right? You might have all the knowledge around you. You might have on-demand apps, on-demand videos. But if the child doesn't have engagement and motivation to learn, that won't happen. And the only person who can provide that is the teacher and the adults. Self-motivation is overrated. Even in building habits, I don't think willpower and self-motivation is the answer. It is the adults who's going to build that motivation there. So I think teachers in the context of AI have to figure out that my roles are changing. So where is my skill lie then?
And that will help them build that human connection as well.
Absolutely.
So to speak. So, with all the dreaming that we do as educators and in education ecosystem at large, we're still part of, a country where policy and support of the larger ecosystem in which education is a subset, that support has to be there. So, as a sort of a progressive educator, what sort of policy changes would you aspire to be seen change over the next decade to help us to be that future India that we are all trying to aspire for?
It's a very difficult question to answer, Ankur, because, if you'd asked me this question 5-10 years back, I would have probably given you 5 things. But with age and wisdom, you also realize how complex the problem is. There's no magic wand to help solve through policy work.
Okay.
The another challenge is also not just the size, it's just a diversity, right? What a statement which is said in context of urban schools
does not apply elsewhere.
Does not apply at all. It could be antithesis to another context of a school in India, right? So what is true? In fact, I often say the opposite of good idea in a school, in education, is another good idea. It's not a wrong idea. It's another good idea.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I really can't answer as blanket suggestion what could change in the policy. But broadly, I think if policy can focus on foundation reading, literacy and numeracy, I think as a country, we are so obsessed with higher education. It's one of the, I'm not a Nehru basher, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But one of the ills of the Nehruvian policies is our obsession with heavy industries.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, is our obsession with higher education, which is IITs in it. We call IITs as the temples of dams and IITs are temples of modern India.
Yeah.
I think it's a very Russian, a Soviet overhang.
Okay.
We should have followed the Japanese way. In Japan, the temples of modern India were not big industries, was not higher education. It is primary education, early healthcare, and small industries.
Interesting.
Yeah. So creation of IITs, I think, just took our attention away
from the primary education.
From millions and millions of young children with no skills. And we get obsessed with a few 0.1% of kids who go up, become engineers, who anyways would have done really well in life without an IIT also.
Yeah. And then they leave the country also.
And in any case, they leave the country, right? So, primary policy reorientation that has to happen, irrespective of private school, public schools, is shifting gears from our obsession with higher education to obsessing with primary and early years care. Great nations actually have free early years and primary schooling, and higher it, you pay for it. And you pay a bomb for it. You take loans and get in. In India, it's the other way around. You pay a bomb for your primary school and early years school, and your IITs and all is pittance. Delhi University, everything is pittance. That can't happen.
Yeah.
I don't think higher ed is very important. In our country, in fact, vocation is more important.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing I think policy needs to change is focus on early years and primary education. Focus on foundation literacy and numeracy. That everybody should be able to read well and write well, be able to do complex mathematics and numeracy. Those are foundations into higher order academic. Second orientation is focus a lot on vocational.
Okay.
This is very controversial in a country like in India, but at the risk of being controversial, the truth is, if a country aims every child to go to university, as a country as large as this, remember we add one Australia every year. That's the number of children who enter our formal schooling system and who graduate.
Yeah.
Right? You can't aspire everybody to be in university. Then you will have peons or class 4 laborers having master's qualification and PhD qualification. I think our youth spend a lot of time in useless graduation and post-graduations.
True.
They should be doing what Singapore and Germany does, that they learn vocational skills. Vocation skills pay you more. You're more qualified. You probably earn 3x, 4x more than a useless postgraduate degree in history or in English. We have peons who are masters and PhDs. Another important policy change that has to happen, and it is beginning to happen, is recognizing that a country as large as India, where we have the largest school-going population, and we're going to have the largest school-going population for the next 20 to 30 years, is recognizing that the state or the government can't do everything. The only solution to school all our children, only solution to ensure that all children have a good shot, is encouraging private entrepreneurs. 20, 30 years back, if you had a few DAVs, you had a few convents, it worked. But those few DAVs and few convents had a huge wait list.
Yep.
Right?
Admissions were a huge challenge.
That is why in our generation, you have cutoffs of 99% in DU, which is unimaginable, even for a course like English. You need to have thousands of Delhi universities.
Yep.
You can't have thousands of Delhi universities in a country like India just by the government. So the government has to encourage hundreds and hundreds of, no, not hundreds, thousands and thousands of private entrepreneurs to come and set up schools, preschools, colleges, universities, vocational institutes, and treat those entrepreneurs as a critical part of nation building.
Yeah. And, just to build upon what you just said about not every help can come from the government, and policy making in general is a very complex thing that we are realizing more and more. What are school owners who are already running schools or wannabe school owners who are wanting to enter this space, what can they do given the current landscape to thrive in the environment that's available to us?
So if you're a wannabe school owner wanting to start a school in our country, I would say please don't start a school. It is exceptionally tough, difficult to start a school. And once you start, that's when the real problem starts. Running a school is very, very difficult given the regulatory environment, etc. Of course, some state governments, some states are far more pro to private entrepreneurs than other states would be. But generally, running a school in our country, it is a lot of challenge. If you're in it to create wealth for you and the family, there are better business ideas for you to do it. Please don't come into schools in it. But if you're there as some of the fools are, that I want to change the country, I would really want to do some meaningful work for myself and the society, then you must get into schools. Then you would have the stamina and the capacity to put up with regulatory nonsense.
Yeah.
Right? And then it is worth it. You won't mind going through the hassles and the challenges of setting up a school and running a school. It's not easy in it. And my advice to those committed and passionate educators is that now that you have decided to go through the pain, give yourself 10 years of going through the pain. No school is going to turn around in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, etc. Like I have several investors who come to me and said, no, Vishnu sir, I want to set up the school. I have so much of money, land, etc. In 3-4 years, let's get the money out. I said, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you want to run a commercial entity, of course, 3-4 years, you're going to get your investment back. But if you want to run a meaningful school that has an impact on the community in which it operates, it's going to take 7, 8, 10 years. And it is like wine.
Yeah.
Wrong analogy when talking about school, but it takes time to incubate and let a community mature for it to give value. So give that time, and you'll have tremendous rewards at the end of 10 years.
Financially speaking, is it a myth then that school owners would do well financially?
It's absolutely a myth. Just the way it's a myth, people say starting a restaurant is easy business, but people don't realize, and I'm borrowing this from Bill Gates, he talks about this, that 9 out of 10 restaurants shut down. Despite the fact we all know food is a great business, everybody needs food and we all keep ordering on Zomato. But what we don't realize, food industry is full of graveyards. If you go to the graveyard of food industry, nobody will want to start a restaurant.
But is school similar in that context?
Schools also is so true.
Okay.
You don't see badly running schools because you don't get to know them because the building is still there. But there are several schools who start with a lot of ambition, intention, right intentions, etc., but they're not able to sustain. And you can't shut down a school, unlike a restaurant. So you get to know a restaurant is shut down, you change. But it's very difficult to shut down a school. So typically what happens is the owners will drag the school and let it, you can't kill a school, you can't shut down a school, but you will probably reduce the quality. It'll reduce the investments and trainings, and it'll just be a school which is running. And there are several schools around you. Parents are just not aware.
And seems to be an increasing interest among different investments coming into education, whether it is private equity or different sources or new interests wanting to get into education space. And I know you've got some context with that. What are your thoughts about education space seeing more investments coming in? What type of investments will it attract? And how does that investments shape the future of education going forward?
Yeah. So 20 years back, or even 15 years back, or 10 years back also, most of education was started by folks who had land. So typically you have the real estate players wanting to start a school because they had access to a land and a building, etc. But what is good now is that good capital now is chasing to set up good schools. And I'm also, when I started my career in K-12 education, I always thought starting a school with your own money is very difficult. But today, it's still difficult, but at least the capital problem is solved. That there are good institutional investors, there are long-term investors, there are rich individuals, family offices, for example, who want to start a school with an impact in mind.
Okay.
And because access to capital has become more easier, I think you'll find a lot more well-meaning institutions getting created in the next 10 or so years.
Wonderful.
Right? Of course, private equity is also one of the natures of capital, but that's just one part of it.
Sure.
You have a lot of FDI coming into schools in the last 4-5 years, pension funds, institutional investors, family offices, who have a long tenure for their investments, which kind of complements the life cycle of an institution also.
Education,
Because in education, typically, if you invest, you don't expect returns immediately. You want the investment to be long term.
Yep.
And some of these funds also have long tenure in their own mind, which is a good thing actually. So it's great news for school entrepreneurs that you have good money chasing projects, you have good opportunities to raise capital at reasonable cost, and it's good for the society.
And these consolidations or aggregations or FDI investments, they also come with some level of expertise and wanting to do things in a structured way, and that could really organize the sector a lot better going forward.
Yeah, any aggregation is a good thing,
Yeah.
And it's happened in all sectors. For example, unorganized to organized, that transition generally helps the consumers in it. So I would like to believe that large platforms of school platforms, etc., you're able to have better investments in R&D, better investment in training, your capacity to attract talent is much better. So in those things, I think it's good that more serious talent is coming in now.
Yeah.
We're able to attract corporate career focus. You don't have to be a stupid idiot like me to make that shift blindly. Today,
there's more track records being shown by people like you, actually.
That's why there are people who are moving in. Pay is much better than what it was before. You have professional CEOs moving in. You have very senior level vice presidents, general managers moving into education space. All that is because of large aggregation which has happened in the last 4-5 years. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Vishnu, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights today. It's truly inspiring to see your journey, hear about it, and the vision that you have going forward with building these institutes of education and more campuses coming in your journey. So I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Ankur. Thank you for your time. I think your questions really made me think a lot more. I'm sure if you have to redo this interview, I'll have far more nuanced answers. But thank you so much for those questions and your time. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I believe our conversation today will help you walk away with a deeper understanding of how to foster creativity, empathy, and meaningful learning in your schools and communities. Don't forget to subscribe to InspireEd and follow us for more transformative conversations with education leaders. Until next time, keep learning and keep inspiring.